we have not been paying that much attention on the program to what's been going on in Israel and Palestine. Israel has been sort of expanding its presence and taking over more homes in the West Bank and basically just confiscating them, stealing these homes from Palestinians.
And over Ramadan, they conducted what they pretty much is an annual tradition of theirs, raids on and beatdowns in the al-Aqsa mosque. We headlined those when you were out a little bit, but this story grabbed everybody's attention this morning.
Let's play the video first.
Well, yeah, we don't have the video of the actual killing because it's too graphic to show, but a Palestinian-American journalist was killed by the IDF.
Her name was Shireen Abu Akleh, and she has been covering Palestine for Al Jazeera English.
Yeah, supposedly very famous journalist in Palestine.
The example of Israeli aggression, and this is the brutality of Israeli occupation against Palestinians, whether journalists or whether any Palestinian. And also the double standards is a good example of how the double standard is obvious. This is not Ukraine, this is Jenin, this is Palestine, and we are waiting not just for condemning, but for serious action to be taken by the international community.
So she was covering an Israeli raid on, as you mentioned, it was a camp in Jenin. There were multiple other reporters with her. They were all wearing at least all of them were wearing press vests. She was wearing a press helmet, and she was shot in the face. Now, it's allegedly by the IDF. We don't know for certain, but it seems quite clear. Because listen to this quote this is from a Times of Israel piece. Israeli military spokesperson Ron Kochav described Abu Akleh as, quote, filming and working for a media outlet amidst armed Palestinians. They're armed with cameras, if you'll permit me to say so. So that was basically an admission of, yeah, they're not armed with weapons, but there's something just as dangerous for us that they're armed with, and that's the documentation of what we're doing to Palestinian homes. So as this happens, there's bulldozing of Palestinian homes in the West Bank. Israeli courts are essentially not stopping it, which is not surprising. And this journalist was killed killed, and the Israeli ambassador from the U.S. says, we want a deep investigation into this. But frankly, I don't know if people are going to get upset by this comparison, but I was reminded of Jamal Khashoggi and how the United States did nothing to respond to the murder of he was a U.S. resident. She was Palestinian-American. They're not going to do anything about this. They didn't hold Saudi Arabia accountable, even though Biden ran on it. He came in and was so terrified, and he did nothing to stand up to Mohammed bin Salman or Saudi Arabia, and the same lack of accountability is going to happen with Israel in this instance.
Well, and I think, I don't know. I think that is, the bottom line is there is no circumstance at this point where the U.S. government will hold the Israeli government to account. It's just not happening, regardless of whether it's a journalist, whether it's, and frankly, the media, same thing. The point that the guy in the video made about Ukraine holds true. We've seen it in terms of our involvement in Yemen, in supporting the Saudi Arabians, their assault on Yemen. We see it in what's happening in Afghanistan in terms of the starvation that is there because simply we stole their money. And have basically made it impossible for their banking system to work. This is not to diminish what's happening in Ukraine, of course. I mean, that's horrible. But the point is that our whole system is set up so that we can ignore these things when they happen, coincidentally, to brown people. And yeah, we're not going to hold Israel to account. And even at the bottom line, it's even if they say like, oh, well, we've done our investigation and we have blamed this lieutenant or this private in our defense forces for firing. They thought they were armed or whatever it is. It again elides the main point of what's going on there. Yeah. It is an occupation. It is an apartheid system. These are not my words. Well, they are my words, but I'm not the first person to say that. You can find many Israelis, former Israeli officials, elected officials, former Israeli military officials, former Israeli Shin Bet officials who say what's going on there is apartheid. And hopefully, there was a documentary that came out about Jenin 20 years ago, I think it was, about the exact same thing. Israeli soldiers, IDF going in there, displacing, oppressing, attacking Palestinians. I'm not saying that there are angels on either side or that everyone, but I mean, the dynamic is quite obvious.
But retaliatory violence is to be expected in a decades-long military occupation.
Yeah, that's the bottom line.
Conflating the two obscures the power dynamic, and it's by design that is the focus.
Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yes. My name is Gal. I'm originally from Israel. I am now in Boston, and I'll be seeing you on the weekend.
Fantastic.
So I just, this morning I'm seeing everything that's happened. As always, every morning in Israel, something sucks. And I'm reading the local news there, and like the amount of propaganda has always been there. But I just wanted to read you something that is just so crazy and just shows you like the amount of propaganda that they put on the Israeli people. All right. Yeah. So I'm reading because I couldn't find it in English because they will not put it for English reading people. So this is only from the Hebrew website. So I'm going to just try to translate it while I'm reading it. So Secretary of Defense, Gideon Sa'ar, blames the Palestinians of blood libel about Israel. So they're already like winking towards anti-Semitism. The facts are that there was military, they were taking, I'm sorry, it's kind of hard.
You're doing good.
Okay. So they say they go into Jenin to take suspect of terrorist acts, whatever that means. So they say from there was a lot of killers coming out and killing Israeli people. Again, it's so like, and then they say it was very viable for us to go in there. The Palestinians, in their ways, are quickly again, he says again, like quickly doing blood libels about the IDF. Exactly 20 years ago when they did the blood libels about the operation that was there in Jenin. And then he says, by all our investigation, there is indication that she was not the press. I don't remember her name. I'm sorry. That was killed. She was hit by Palestinians and not by the IDF. Obviously, they don't give any explanation for that. And there was. Yeah, of course. And there was a call for investigation, pathological investigation with the Palestinians, but they do not want to let us do investigation by ourselves because they maybe want to hide the truth.
Right.
And it's just, it's just terrible. I will go off the air to let you speak about it.
I have a question for you.
Oh, okay.
How long ago did you leave Israel?
I left 4 years ago. I've lived there 30 years. So basically when I was 30, I escaped that hellhole. And yeah, since I've been out, it's so much easier seeing outside of like the indoctrination and socialization and propaganda that we are blasted with since the day we are born. It's so crazy how it's ingrained in every little aspect of our lives. And, you know, I was there, unfortunately, a year ago in May, exactly when the operation, quote unquote, was going on. And, you know, missiles are falling, and I'm going into arguments with my dad. He's like, well, it's better for Palestinian children to die instead of our children. It goes to, you know, and I'm talking about Palestinian rights and occupation and go back to, you know, 48 and talking about them, about history. And he's just like, and this is classical, something that they say in Israel for everybody that's tried to protect and talk about Palestinians. And they're like, well, go live in Gaza with your friends. And even that my dad didn't say, but a lot of people say, well, go fuck Arabs, you know, stuff like that. And you're a traitor and you should be hanged and stuff like that. That's the way talk goes in Israel. So yeah,
I mean, you know, I don't know. You've had 15 years, 16 years, maybe of like sort of like, you know, semi-adult awareness of how the politics are going. But what did you notice any, you know, the direction that things are going in there? I mean, like I
think it's just basically a constant, you know, it's constantly been happening. I think I am more aware of it as a grown-up and being outside of it. But it's just, you know, it's constant ethnic cleansing. They keep, you know, of course, they build more settlements, but just as the, you know, amount of hate grows in the Palestinian people and, you know, just teenage people that are so desperate come and they try to stab one soldier and then they shoot them and, you know, they die and they don't think about why do this little kid came and tried to stab the soldier. It will do nothing. They don't talk about psychological effects on the youth and anything. So the hate grows there. And then, you know, the repercussion is the idea of soldiers and all the military basically saying, look, there's so much terrorists coming out of there, so we need to do more action. It's like, and they try to start it, you know, they go to the Temple Mountain, to al-Aqsa, and they basically start it, but they only show it afterwards as, oh my God, they're bombing their own mosque. And it's like, no, they're trying to protect. And, you know, from the bombs that are coming, it's just, I think they're trying to broaden, like, they're trying to push it more and more, push them outside more and more and more. But it hasn't changed.
What about Israelis your age? Is the attitude more or less the same?
It's very difficult because, you know, the real activists that go out there, it's a very small amount. And again, because like even good friends of mine, they consider themselves left, but they're also very, you know, they're Zionists. They believe in what the Jews deserve after the Holocaust. It's very, very hard because there's been, again, so much indoctrination from the minute we were born. So there is no real left, obviously, in politics. And, you know, all the grown-up liberals, they think, obviously, that they're left, but obviously they're not. And so, yeah, young people, they're not really waking up to this because there's also so much other troubles in Israel. They're thinking about their immediate needs, about, you know, there's just a lot of terrible things going in Israel anyway. So, yeah, they're just like, whatever, that's out there. It's terrorist and we don't care about it. And we have, you know, a really bad economy and things going on.
Well, that part's kind of universal, right? It's a lot of people, I think, have a hard time seeing through state propaganda because they're worried about, you know, their own personal lives, their relationships, their job, etc.
Yeah, and I don't want to defend any Israeli people. I think 90% of them are crap, really terrible, terrible people. But I do want to say that again, it's really, really hard because when you look inside the constant socialization of this and like doctrination, you understand where all the hate and the bigotry and the racism comes from. But then again, it's like they have to do more. But yeah, they're just not aware. They don't care. They're too tired. Everybody knows somebody that died. And of course, the Holocaust is bombarded into our mind, again, since the day we were born, basically. And we're the chosen people because of the Bible. And there's so much that they're just, well, you know, they deserve it. And we're the best. And this is our land. So, yeah.
Well, I appreciate the call.
Yes.
Go.
Thank you for the insight.
I just became a member today, and I just called for the first time. So thank you so much for getting my call. Yay!
Thanks for the call. See you in Boston.
And yeah, see you. Yeah, see you in the Wilbur.
See you there.
Bye.
Bye.
Just
It's very, very helpful to have that kind of insight too. You know, I mean, I'm obviously not Jewish, and I've never been to Israel, but and I'm not Israeli, so I don't know. But
I definitely think the country has become, has moved to the right, certainly over the past 40 years, without a doubt, in my mind. I think a lot of the people, like that caller, and older, have left the country. And I think, you know, the things that contributed to this, also the influx of a lot of Russian emigres into the country, that were brought in to basically become facts on the ground in the West Bank. You know, in my experience, folks from Russia can go in one of two directions. You know, you're raised in an authoritarian, you know, because I'm talking about these were people coming out of the Soviet Union. You know, in the 80s, in the 90s, you're raised in a totalitarian society. It impacts the way that you perceive threats and non-threats, or how easily you are told certain threats. And also, you have the opportunity to leave, and we're talking about 1 million, I think, you know, close to 1 million emigres, I think. And you're given land. It's not yours, but you're given an opportunity, and you want to make sure that no one takes that from you. And that was what the game plan was all along.
It historically, it just surprises me that Israel has been so strident on this, given the example of South Africa. And it's almost as if like they're not worried about what happened to South Africa. Maybe that's because South Africa upset their sort of like great power allies by like siding with the Nazis during World War II and stuff like that, and Israel like still feels safe in that regard or something. I'm not sure what the difference is, but it's shocking.